thanks to everyone for joining us for this week's webinar on grassroots resistance. And this is part of our series called Decolonizing the Planet, Building the World We Want to See. And Slí Eile is an anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist direct action environmental group, and we formed last year. And we believe in the power of self-organized communities to create the new. And our aims are to create spaces for education for ourselves and our communities, to build a radical climate movement on the island of Ireland, and to act to end the capitalist control of people and the earth. So this evening we'll be joined by Cormac McAleer from Save Our Sperrins, a group campaigning against a gold mine in the Sperrin Mountains, by Chaz Jewett, Minikuju Lakota, who campaigned against the Keystone Pipeline and many other campaigns, and Jamie Murphy from Love Leitrim, a group which successfully campaigned for a ban on fracking in the south. And later on, we'll also have music from Techno Peasant, also known as Conor O'Kane. So this discussion will focus on voices from the front lines of environmental struggles, both here in Ireland and globally. And so this resistance includes blocking and challenging extractivism, so the extraction of resources like fossil fuel projects, mining, deforestation, challenging land grabbing for these extractive projects, or for example, monoculture plantations like palm oil, rubber and logging, resource grabbing like hydroelectric and mega dam projects, and the continuation of business as usual like airport expansion projects, and also challenging environmental racism and classism. We see around the world people of colour and minority ethnic groups and people living in poverty, living beside dumps and incinerators with high levels of pollution and poor water quality. And we see this environmental racism here in Ireland, particularly in relation to the substandard accommodation experienced by the traveller community. And in terms of these destructive extractive projects, they only profit due to this resource grabbing from communities, with little or no benefit to local communities or the general population of the country that they're based in. They profit because of cheap labour, including very poor working conditions for their workers, and through subsidies and tax avoidance by corporations. So these projects benefit from the mechanics of capitalist exploitation at many different levels. And earth defenders around the world risk their lives as part of this resistance. Of the 304 human rights defenders killed in 2019, more than half were environmental and Indigenous rights defenders. But communities in Ireland and around the world are resisting the exploitation and destruction of the planet and challenging the capitalist view of the earth as a disconnected, disposable commodity. This extractive view, which sees nature and people as invisible in an empty landscape or a sacrifice zone ripe for the taking. So frontline communities are pushing back against the expansion of extractivism and offering solutions to social and ecological injustice. However, their voices remain largely absent in climate policy, campaigning spaces and agendas. So foregrounding and learning from frontline communities is a crucial part of creating a different world. And across the world, Indigenous people have been at the front lines of the struggle against land grabbing, big oil and extractive development projects. And it's a particularly exciting time, as in the last couple of weeks, 3 major oil and gas pipelines have been thwarted. The Atlantic Coastal Pipeline, which was supposed to transport gas through Appalachia, has been scrapped by developers, citing mounting costs due to legal issues brought by Indigenous and environmental groups. The Keystone XL pipeline decision to cease operation, so individual planning permission may be sought for each water and wetland crossing, which has been upheld by the US Supreme Court, and the Dakota Access Pipeline, which has been ordered to shut down, emptied of oil until an environmental impact statement can be carried out. Not to mention, the same day the Supreme Court handed down the Keystone decision, they also handed down the landmark decision declaring nearly half of Oklahoma native reservation. These are some pretty major wins for Indigenous rights of Turtle Island, aka North America. Big Oil will certainly appeal the Dakota and Keystone decisions, but these court decisions are without a doubt a massive victory. And in 2007, one of our speakers this evening, Chaz Jewett, spoke of Standing Rock as a beacon of hope. that the poorest people in the world were stepping up against these fossil fuel industries, and that was pretty powerful. Here in Ireland, the anti-fracking campaign has also had some major victories in the last few years, in particular with the ban on fracking in the south signed into law in 2017. While in the north, each exploration threat has faced considerable opposition, and as of April this year, there are no active petroleum licenses in the north. However, the threat continues to remain. Most recently, the anti-fracking and anti-LNG campaigns fought to have the following statement put into the recent programme for government. And this statement was, "We do not support the importation of fracked gas and shall develop a policy statement to establish that." And also that the Shannon LNG will be withdrawn from the EU Projects of Common Interest list in 2021. So public opinion has shifted much closer to a leave it in the ground perspective over the last 10 years. However, the extractivist mindset is still present given the extensive granting of exploratory licenses here across the island. But our speakers this evening show the power of self-organised communities to build collective power and challenge this capitalist extractivism. And they've built networks of solidarity, not just across Ireland, but across the world. So our speakers this evening are Cormac McAleer, and he's here with us from Save Our Sperrins, who are resisting Dalradian, a Canadian mining company seeking to open one of the largest gold mines in Europe, in the beautiful rural area of the Sperrins. And the north of Ireland is experiencing a boom. The north of Ireland is experiencing a boom in extractive practices, from licensing pending for fracking, oil and gas exploration and mining, with 20% of the land of the north of Ireland has been granted in mineral prospecting licenses. However, there's many groups of resistance in response to this, and Cormac will tell us more about the campaign in a little while. We're also joined by Chaz Jewett, who's a former organizer turned activist who has worked, among other things, against the Keystone XL pipeline, police brutality, and for reproductive justice in South Dakota. After Standing Rock, she's been to Ireland twice, Australia once, and Canada 3 times. She has also walked 35 days along most of the Missouri River on the Nebe Walk, then all the way to Wisconsin on the last day, and last year the Red River. So she's continuing her activism. And also we'll be joined by Jamie Murphy from Love Leitrim, and that's a group that was set up in 2011 after people started hearing about fracking and realised the impact it would have on the Northwest and the country as a whole. And Love Leitrim, their aim was to ban fracking, and this came to pass a few years ago in the South, at least. And the group was active, meeting every week for 6 years and doing lots of local, national and global organising. So also the group paid tribute to the community in Rossport for their part they played in the success of getting fracking banned, because it was that solidarity and that communication between the communities in Rossport and Leitrim which made the community aware first of the proposed fracking and the need to organise and resist. And members of Love Leitrim have also been active in the campaign against the proposed LNG terminals as well. And then we'll also have we'll have some music from Connor as well later on, and he's also been active in the campaign around the Sperrins and writing music kind of inspired by that struggle. So we'll have that music later on. So now I'll pass you over to Owen. So first of all, we'll begin with the main questions, and then while the discussion's happening, people can also, watching on YouTube, can also add your questions, and if you can have those questions in by 5 to 9, that would help us to be able to ask the speakers, and also the conversation on YouTube will be moderated. So any so offensive material will be removed from the stream. So that's just to let people know that the conversation there on YouTube will be moderated, but I'll hand over to Owen now.
Cool. Thanks, Shinta. So good evening, everyone. So we'll start with an easy question for the start anyway, and I'll ask each of the speakers just to give a little background and history of their campaign. I know that Cormac, ye had some interesting protests there this week, so if you could just give us a general background of it, that'd be great. You just need to unmute. You need to unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself there, Cormac. Will we, sorry, maybe we'll, Chaz, would you be able to take that question? And we'll come back to Cormac in a minute. So we're asking speakers to keep it to 4 minutes, please, as we'd like to get to some audience, a few more audience questions than we have.
Okay, sure. Well, and I think the host gave all the news that I had to share in her introduction. But I've been working against the Keystone Pipeline since 2008, since they first suggested it. And we've got some good news before, so we're taking this as we took the last time, which is we'll be really excited when the folks from Trans Canada come and pick up their stuff and take it away, because it's still here. The man camp, the work camp is still being built. As of last week, they still have their materials here. So until it's all gone, I think we'll be cautiously happy. And so I've worked on that issue, and I did kind of forget the question here, but I think I've worked on a whole bunch of other stuff. So I was at Standing Rock there too. So the Dakota Access Pipeline last week is just, I think, still sending a lot of ripples of gratitude through Indian country, because not only did they, reject the permits, but they said empty it as well right away. And so that was really exciting and wonderful. So I think that it says a lot, I think, about the direction that we're going in. She gave such a great talk intro to me, but she also didn't mention the other thing that was just really astounding about last week was the football team, the National Football League that we have here in America. The Washington football team has been called the Redskins, which is a slur and used to denote our scalps, a couple 100 years ago. And it's a slur still that folks get called quite a bit. And so gratitude to the work of the Black Lives Matter folks and the people who are out in the street on doing revolutionary work right now. We get to experienced that wonderful victory for us, you know, because the mascot issue is the underlying thing that we have in America, which is genocide and the ongoing genocide. If you're able to be mascotted, then you're able to be dehumanized. And so I think that that was just an amazing victory that's come. And I think a lot of folks are really grateful. A lot of women, a lot of folks who are tribal attorneys and DC Indians. I've been working on this issue for a long time. And so it's come about, like everything that we get, with a lot of hard work and a lot of you know, underappreciated organizers doing work, and then eventually, and you never know, like, so you know what's happening over here in America. It's a revolution, and let me tell you that you know, I'm not on the streets. I'm along the Jewett Creek, which was named after my great grandfather. I think that's too many greats. Anyway, 1823. I'm on the res on our tribal lands right now, so I'm not able to participate or support folks on the streets of our cities, but it's because of them and their sacrifices. There's actually been several deaths of folks who are fighting the police every day. So we got that victory, the mascot issue. I think, you know, we live in a white supremacist state, and so these things are all a part of it. And so it's a good thing that things are starting to break down. It's a wonderful thing. It's our prayers being answered. I think in our introduction, and I'm only seeing myself here.
No, they knocked her off, I think.
You've muted yourself there, Chaz.
She's
okay. Thanks a million, Chaz. That was a great intro, and yeah, it is great to see some of the excitement of what's currently happening. That you're feeding that back to us. So I'll ask the same question of Cormac, and just to give a general background on the campaign and a bit of history on it.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Owen, and great to be here with you all this afternoon. You rightly mentioned, Owen, that we had a direct action event a couple of days ago when 4 of us mounted the rooftop of the Dalradian offices in the compound at Colonialism. And despite the area being sealed off and being confronted by police, that there was a very successful protest there, a peaceful protest that day. A little bit about the history of our campaign that seems to have been going on for decades now, but really the Save Our Sperms campaign was initiated formally in 2015. It's very much a people's campaign, and it's very much about saving our home place from the toxic pollution of gold mining. And the Sperms is an area of outstanding natural beauty in the borders of Tyrone and County Derry. And a Canadian gold mining company came to the area back some years ago and worked very much at the grassroots, building up and getting in with the community to develop a social license. And they were given rights for an exploratory gold mine, not even a gold mine, an exploratory mining tunnel in 2013. Our campaign is very much focused on the planning application that they subsequently submitted for a major gold mine and processing plant in the area. And the plan is by Dalradian, it's not just for a single mine, but for, in the words of their chief executive, it's for a mine camp. Gold mining, you will know, is one of the most toxic industries there is. And from the outset, as I said, the company invested heavily in gaining a social license, targeting people of influence, giving out gifts and hampers to get people on side, to community organizations, lobbying civil servants, and getting the politicians on side. The campaign has been involved in public information meetings, organizing them throughout the Sperrins, and arising from that many community-based action groups, some 10 or 12 of them throughout the Sperrins area, centred on Greencastle, County Tyrone here. These groups have all been set up. The methodology used has been leaflets and the use of social media. Because the mainstream media are used by Dalradian for advertising, we found that it was very difficult to get publicity in the local papers. So the Facebook page that was set up by Sabre Sperrins and in turn by the Greencastle People's Office and the other groups has been an important way of getting the message out. Direct action and protests has been the order of the day as well. And these have been very successful in getting the word out beyond the local area. So much so that there are currently 37,000 letters of objections submitted to the planning department. And more recently, there's an announcement that there will be a public inquiry. There have been many other actions carried out by local people. And suffices to say that there is a lack of trust by the local people in the planning system and in the authorities. And people believe that there is a need for operating on many fronts, including direct action, including engagement with the planners. But it's very much people realise that unless the people stand up and be counted and put ourselves on the line, that our environment as well as ourselves will be relics of history, and that, you know, the clean water, the fresh air, and the unpolluted environment will be something of history. Thank you. You're right.
Cool. Thanks a million, Cormac. That was a great intro and very interesting altogether. So maybe I'll ask the same question of Jamie to just give a brief background and history on, we'll say, the Love Leitrim campaign and more generally the anti-fracking campaign in Ireland, which has been a really successful campaign.
Well, as Jacinta mentioned there in the introduction, it was actually the communities in Rossport that alerted us initially to the danger and the threat we were facing here in Leitrim, with the screening of the Pipe film here locally, and, you know, at the Q&A after, some members of the community from Rossport, you know, basically warned us about it. We also had the screenings of the Josh Fox film Gasland, again, which was another introduction to what the industry was about, because for a lot of people, we weren't really maybe aware of what fracking was and what it was as a process and what it meant for communities. So after that, people began to get educated about what was involved in the process, the threats involved, and also, most importantly, began to get organised as groups, you know, across the region. In our own particular group was Love Leitrim, so we were based primarily in Manorhamilton, and we were a flat-based group. We had people from all different political parties, political persuasions and professions and backgrounds, and we kind of set up very, very quickly that we had to get organised, have a clear aim and objectives of how we were going to achieve that aim. So that was initially how we got started. I suppose the process then was, there was a few different key strands to the process. One was being organised, knowing what we were doing, what we were aiming to go for, which was a ban on fracking, but also to remain positive about the area and offer alternatives, whether that was community-based renewable energy or tourism. We were offering something in as a an alternative to people maybe who locally might have been attracted by the notion of jobs being brought in by the industry. So we were always positive about the area, what we had to offer, and that would be under threat from the industry. So yeah, we were again members. We had members, like, I suppose, from all different backgrounds. So key people in our group, and they played a pivotal role really in delivering what became the ban ultimately. 2017 were the fishermen, the farmers. We reached out to all different groups of society locally, the older people's groups, religious groups, the tourism providers. We actually reached out and put across what was over the horizon if we were going to allow these industries to gain a foothold in the area. So we talked to the farmers in the IFA, the local fishing groups. We did it. That was a huge part of the initial part of the campaign, was trying to get the information out there, because the education was key for us as people on the ground, but also getting that information out there, because you can't argue with the science. You couldn't argue with the fact that this is going to decimate our tourism industry or agriculture. You couldn't argue with the fact that the jobs being promised by the company Tamboran didn't add up. So we had to spend a lot of time to start getting that out there. We also, I suppose, in relation to campaigning, we did a lot of local and national campaigning. We reached out to local authorities, got them in Leitrim and Sligo and in the northwest to insert opposition to fracking in their county development plans and in their council meetings. We worked with various political parties on drafting legislation, which ultimately was delivered in 2017. We did a huge amount on social media, reached out to celebrities, international organizations like Chaz and like New Yorkers Against Fracking. We worked with people like Glenn Hansard, Christy Moore, Mark Ruffalo, so the young people in the Climate Youth Assembly. So we just had a huge multi-strand approach that always remained positive and always inclusive, and it was also cross-border. And we were key played a key part as well in the protests in Belcoo as well, and the community, working the communities there. So that's a very short synopsis of what we did, but my time is up.
Cool. Thanks a million, Jamie. That was a great background to it all. I remember being at a talk by Jessica Ernst, and basically she was saying, with fracking, you're trying to delay it as much as you can because the science will catch up, and that it'll be very hard to argue with the science. And I think you're starting to see that in the anti-fracking campaigns in general and the LNG now.
I forgot to mention Jessica, sorry, because she played a pivotal role as well when she came to Glenfarne in the ballroom of romance, and it was packed out, and it really opened up people's eyes to what was potentially going to happen in our own area. The human interest stories were always very, very important to get across. And people like Jessica and Chaz, and now today the impact of communities in Pennsylvania in relation to LNG. So that's a huge part of what we did as well, was with the personal stories.
Cool. So maybe I'll go back to Cormac now, if that's okay. And so the next question is, what lessons have you learned so far? And I suppose we're learning lessons all the time, but on community organizing and building a strong grassroots resistance campaign.
Thank you very much. We learned many lessons, and in fact we're still learning. We feel we're still involved in a steep learning curve. In order to build a campaign, it's important at the start to plan, to make plans, decide what needs to be done, and then organize around doing it. We found it's important that, because there's such a variety of people, that in order to get involved, it's very helpful if they have a task to do that suits their interests and their needs and the skills that they possess. So we realized that at the outset it was important that we inform ourselves and then get the message out and informing other people through public meetings, information leaflets, posters, networking, direct action, and indeed celebrations. And it was one of those celebrations that we were very pleased to welcome Charles Jewett, and what a day we had, what a night we had there, and what a boost to the campaign, having the inspiration and the camaraderie of other people in places far away. And we realize, and through networking, we realize that all of us who are involved in the job of protecting the universe and the nature and people's health and well-being, that there is such a strong bond, even though we're divided from far away. Lessons we learned, as said, many lessons, that the big mining will be vicious, they'll stop at nothing. A number of us have received death threats, and there's many people have been before courts and been threatened with court. We know that it's par for the course that these companies try to criminalize key leaders. With harassment by trolls online has been a big issue here, and we know that they're being fed information by Dalradian, and that is something that creates a lot of hassle, tries to create division among peoples, that can be very dangerous for a campaign and very, very hurtful for a campaign. The importance of networking widely, keeping your tactics flexible and planning for the long haul, and that in the organising that there's horses for courses, there's people for performing the important task of welcoming visitors to the Greencastle People's Office, which is a focal point for the campaign, and making people feel welcome and talking to visitors. The role of lobbying is important too, and the role of the direct action and protest, and there's all types of activity. Then administration, writing letters, etc., is very important. A lesson that we learned, we believed initially that we had got quite strong environmental legislation here, but we learned that in fact that government supports corporate interests, and that environmental bodies regulate the destruction of the environment. I think my time's up.
Cool. Thanks, Cormac. Yeah, there was some interesting lessons that I think a lot of people who have been involved in campaigning it'll strike a chord with, and it's the same issues we see in most environmental campaigns and that. But yeah, so maybe could I ask Chaz the same question? I know you've been involved in lots of different campaigns, so you might have different experiences from the different campaigns that you've been involved in.
Right, sure, and I just want to say that Cormac is he's serious about everyone who goes there has a duty. They have a really photogenic goat there at the encampment that I remembered had a job to do as well, and I think that that's so right about organizing. Is that we want everyone to feel a part of the system, but also part of the system, part of the action that we're doing, but also really, I mean, that's kind of the revolution in itself, is creating that community. And I just, my heart has been so happy to see Cormac and Fidelma and to see everyone, to know what an impact that my visit there made. Because it made the same impact on me, and I still have such an amazing. It's just, yeah, the trips that I made to Ireland and the Irish people have been such a light to me, at having been an organizer for 20 years and struggling and duking it out here in Western South Dakota. going from, from being a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Democrat to now being pretty much a communist. I think I've done as much of a change, I think, as you can. I worked within the systems of the getting out the native vote and trying to be that voice of our people for 20 years. And then at Standing Rock, I realized that the only voice that the systems hear now is that voice of violence. And that's why we're, literally on the streets today in this country, because we have a reckoning that we need to have. And I think that for a long time, I myself was sort of the peaceful, like, let's all get along. Let's my mom's non-Indian. I have always been walked along that line between here and there, and what is the revolution, what is the opposite of what we have now. And I think what it is it's community, and seeing Cormac and knowing that and the folks that love Leitrim, when I know that the hearts that beat of your strongest leaders are the same hearts that are beating amongst my people, the strong hearts. We're there, we're in front. I remember Cormac telling me a story about him being ripped from his vehicle in front of his children by the police. We the grassroots people, we have those same experiences, and we know them. We know that feeling of powerlessness, and I think that we felt that for a long time against the fossil fuel industries, and with the police here in America. And so I think with these victories that we're having, there's in this pandemic, in this time of these last, it feels like these end times where things are all really super scary. I think it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because we're experiencing the same things that our people, the indigenous people, have been experiencing for 500 years now. We've been saying the same thing over and over and over again, which is, there's another way to live, and you calling it this extractive industries. I call it rape culture. I call it, our bodies are the missing and murdered Indigenous women, or women in general. Our bodies are just as commodified as the trees are, right? I mean, so everything in this culture is the opposite of what we know in our hearts as Indigenous people, that's possible. There's another way possible, and in that way is a way of of community and of relatives. And we dakuye oyasin, that's our what we say, and when we pray. I'm not an activist anymore. I think that I haven't been doing too much, but I have been doing a lot of praying. And these are the things that we do that separates us from non-Indians, from the capitalist cultures, that we pray for the water, with the water. And we pray, those walks, that 35 days I walked along the Missouri River. I was lost. I was lost after what happened at Standing Rock, seeing the violence that came upon us, me working on police brutality. Those 35 days that we walked, and I found myself again as an Indigenous woman in this time, and I know that my existence is the resistance. So I don't have to do too much. I used to do a bunch. I used to be everywhere. I would have been out with my relatives this past weekend when President Trump came to the Black Hills. And I hope some of you got to see the reaction, the welcome that he got, which was not one. We want our land back. We can manage our own lands. And we told him that, and we've been telling, the federal government that same thing since we signed the treaty in 1868, So I think that I've learned so much. I've changed so much since I started organizing in 2001. Was when I started working for the Sierra Club. This was an environmental organization here in America that's pretty racist. They had a population control program. They had, I was the only Native American working for them at the time. So that's the system. The systems we have to break down. So since then, a lot of things have changed. People are starting to recognize that our filters and the way that we see things aren't exactly the way things are. And, those of us who can still have an imagining of another world need to get busy articulating that. And so I think a lot of folks are listening and looking for Indigenous voices to help guide folks through the next, what the world that we're creating, right? So.
Cool. Thanks a million. That's great. And we'll come back to a similar question next. So we'd like to delve deeper into that as well. So
Yep.
Thanks a million. So maybe Jamie, would you be able to give us a few lessons that you've learned? I know with the fracking campaign, it was a spread out campaign over, well, there was Leitrim, but then the wider campaign as well. So I suppose she had both the local and the kind of the wider campaign. So maybe some lessons that you took from all of this.
Yeah. I suppose there's a few different lessons. I've mentioned a couple of them already, and Cormac and Chaz have both reaffirmed them, is the importance of being organised with clear aims and objectives. That was very, very key from the start, from a kind of community development perspective, that you knew where you were headed. Also about the inclusivity of different political persuasions and organisations, because that's, if you want to bring a community with you, you have to bring different people with you. So you have to work with everybody and be open to different points of view. I know it's not always possible, but building a positive relationship, if you can, with media. I know Cormac mentioned he didn't have hasn't had a good experience with their local media. We were lucky that we did. They were always very, willing to put out our press releases and cover our stories, and we were lucky in that case. But that was an important aspect of why we were ultimately, I think, successful. Again, tolerance and respect for all different points of view and strategies as well. There's a time and place for all strategies, whether it's engaging in public consultations like we did on a mass scale. We collected thousands of submissions and templates for different parts of the campaign over the, since 2011, but there's also a place for protest and direct action, and we were engaged in that as well. So it's just being respectful of that there's no one way to win the campaign. I suppose also it's in trying to build those connections with the local international organizations. Like I didn't meet Chaz personally, but I know she was here with Donal Kelly and Eddie Mitchell from, who would be Leitrim members as well. So that was a very, very important thing. Again, being innovative in how you're getting your message out. So again, it could be the use of social media, stunts. Like we had one of our members walk from Manorhamilton to Dublin to raise awareness. We've produced our own t-shirts. I see Jacinta is wearing one of our Love Music Hate Fracking t-shirts. So car stickers. So it's just always trying to be innovative and trying to get the message out. Just as well, I know it can be hard at times, but try not to get too deflated. We were a long time in our campaign, and there's people that have been doing it a lot longer than us. But from 2011 to 2017, it was only 6-7 years. It felt like 3 times that amount of time. But you have to savor every small victory that you get, and no matter what it is, and that from our campaign, not just our campaign, from the fracking campaign as a whole, across the country, you can, small community groups and groups can take on the oil and gas industry and can win. It is possible. We've done it with Tamboran here. We're hoping to do it again with LNG in the Shannon Estuary. So you have to hold on to that as well, and not get too down that, the campaigns can go on for a long time, but you can win. And, to use Greta Thunberg's expression, you're never too small to make a difference. and that's definitely true from our perspective. So that's, I suppose, a key lesson is not to lose hope as well.
Cool, thanks a million. Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson to kind of savor the victories, I think, and to be in for the long fight as well. A lot of these things will take a long time to be successful, and to be as successful as Love Leitrim has been. So maybe I'd come back to Chaz. Now, you have been talking about colonialism a bit, and just your thoughts on the role of colonialism and the struggle for land in the campaigns you've been involved in, like particularly the pipeline campaigns. What are your thoughts on the role of colonialism on that?
Okay. Well, they're all colonial projects, right? And so is America. So we're still 300 years in the making, an experiment that's really starting to unravel, and great, because we're the reason why the world is in shambles, and it is because of this extractive, this imperialistic greed that we've been operating under for 500 years now. I think that the opposite of colonialism, we don't know what that looks like. No one does. It doesn't exist right now anywhere, really. And so I think that it's possible, and I think that we're moving toward it. It's going to be, I think, really ugly. I think it is ugly. That the mainstream media here in America have stopped reporting the protests on the streets, right? But people are everywhere. It's still happening. We don't get to see near as much of the stuff from France, from Hong Kong that you folks get, but it's it's because they're trying to control the message and trying to control the people, and also failing us miserably in the middle of a pandemic. And so I think that the American people are feeling exactly what it feels like to be colonized as a whole right now, and it's not very comfortable to be an Indian, to be a so we're all feeling a bit oppressed, I think, in a lot of ways, and that's a good thing for us. I know that we've been operating under the let's just don't talk about it mentality for a long time, and we can't do that anymore. And so the impacts that these systems have done, have created are devastation, and it's the earth is literally weeping. Down in the Arctic, they've had temperatures over, they've had a heat wave down there. I mean, the water everywhere is being polluted and being used. The fracking stuff. I wanted to say that someone texted me once. I'm totally off of social media except for I'm still on Instagram, but someone texted me once and said that I was the first person to tweet hashtag no fracking. So I'm totally down for that fracking stuff. But now I'm no longer on Twitter, so I don't get to brag about that, but I just did, I guess. But I do think that those different ways that we're colonizing our lands and our bodies are things that we're not really aware of. I think when we're colonized, we compartmentalize, and so we do that with our economy, and we do that with our society. And so what we're having now is out on the streets, there's all kinds of intermingling, and there's all kinds of knowledge spreading, which is a great thing. And mutual aid is happening everywhere out there on the streets. And so, you know, democracy is one of those things that the founders of this country didn't get right, you know, when they stole that from the Iroquois. I like to always remind folks that the founders of this country, the architects of the Constitution, were basically just trying to replicate what the Iroquois Confederacy had done for a long, long time, creating the Great Peace with the tribes over there in the East Coast. They didn't do it all together because they immediately left out the you know, people of color and the women, and the women were the deciders of whether we went to war. And so we've been living under that unequal, that colonialist framework for 500 years now, and we're seeing the repercussions and that out of balance. And so now I think that you know, in a real way, the earth is trying to balance itself by giving us these viruses, these scary things, the fires in Australia. Those are serious, scary things that we have to deal with now. You know, the storms that we have here in Lakota territory are worse. We get hail, we get damaging winds that, you know, we would have one storm a year like that, you know, back in the day, and now we're having them every week. And you know, the hail is coming in. It's amazing. And so, you know, we're dealing with the repercussions of climate change while we're you know, fighting on all these different levels at the same time. So, you know, this I know that we're, as Americans now, sort of the, you know, we're the country that no one wants to come and visit, or no one wants to allow to visit. And that's right. From what I'm saying is they keep us here because we don't deserve to be anywhere else. We need to figure out our stuff right here before we continue to infect the world. So, okay, all right. Oh, that's the end.
Cool. Thanks a million, Chaz. That was very interesting. So maybe I'd ask Cormac the similar question, the role of colonialism, and also if you have any thoughts on the role of class and gender overall in both the project and within the campaign itself.
Thank you. And certainly colonialism would be a very strong impact on our history here. And, you know, in relation to the campaign, for example, we're conscious of the fact that the Queen of England still owns the rights to precious metals here. And it's the Crown Estate Commission that collects the 4% commission or sort of tax on gold that is mined and produced. So the Crown Estate also awards the licenses to companies. So we're very, you know, this part of the world and this part of Ireland also experienced, you know, the consequence of colonization, and even the people, the natives being moved up to these hills that tend to be less fertile is very much part of the history. To the extent to which it would influence the campaign, I suppose there's different views on it. My opinion certainly would be that for example, in the village that Dalradian concentrated on first, that still has the landlord there who is looked up to very much by the local people and has a really big influence, controlling influence on the local community association. There's more of a deference to that type of authority and a dependency. In other parts of the area there, colonialism has created more of a resistance and a rebellious spirit. But that's very much part of of our history. And there's other bits as well, because of the fact that if we concentrate solely on that here, we'll not be seeing the full picture, because in some ways there's the new establishment, and those siding with the big company include people who would be formerly friends of mine, so that it tends to be a complicated picture, and maybe we need to focus as well on class and gender and cross-community participation here as priorities. In terms of class, where the area is small farmers and families, people whose history is in small farmer, but certainly working class area, and people realize more and more that their interests are not served by the current system, and that there's need to build alternatives. But in a way, we are so much focused on the campaign that probably it's easier for others outside to make the big analysis of that. In terms of gender, women play an equal part with the campaign, at least an equal part, if not a more important part than men in the campaign, being frequently the spirit and the soul, and those who focus on, I mentioned earlier, managing the GPO. And whereas the men would take a leading role in some of the more risky protest, direct action type things, the campaign is conscious of the need to focus on being aware of trying to give everybody a role where they're most empowered and where their skills are better used. But no doubt we are influenced by the stereotypical white male, traditions and values. But this campaign likes to see itself as stretching ourselves and stretching each other, and the challenge to together affect change by local people participating equally and empowering themselves in a way that will make a real difference here. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a million, Cormac. That was very interesting. And I suppose, yeah, the same from what Chaz was saying, that we're learning a lot, and all these new protests over Black Lives Matter protests and everything like that is making us all think and reevaluate kind of how we saw things before, and I think that can only be a good thing as well. So maybe now could I ask Jamie, same question. Well, your thoughts on, let's say, class and gender issues, both in the project and within the campaign itself, and as well if you have any thoughts on colonialism.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, the concept of colonialism is very much alive and well with the fossil fuel and the oil and gas and extractive industries as a whole. They're, across the world, and, in Ireland and Europe, they're seeking to gain footholds in communities to basically pillage them and exploit them with no consideration for what the consequences are going to be for the communities that are left behind. And that's very much a facet of colonialism through the centuries, whether it was British and Portuguese or whatever colonialism was. That was always the track record of it, to extract what was of value and to leave behind destruction and death and destroyed environment. So I think that's very, very much alive and well. It just, I suppose the slight difference might be it's not nation states that are doing it anymore. They're international fossil fuel and extractive companies that are competing. And for me anyway, from my point of view, they're very much the new colonial competitors and powers in the world. I suppose in relation to Ireland and ourselves, I suppose people who know anything about Irish history know there's a long history of resistance to colonialism and imperialism, and I think that's still very much alive. It was very much alive in Rossport and in Mayo, where and here as well, where people who have an affinity with the land and where they live, and whether it was people trying to protect their fishing areas in Rossport, or the farmers here in North Leitrim, that one of the most moving and most powerful actions we actually had was a tractor-cade or protest tractor run of about 150 local farmers who made the journey from Manorhamilton to the border, in opposition to fracking. So I think in those kind of actions, you can see that there still is that deep resistance to attempts by people to maybe exploit the land for different alternatives. You can see as well, I think within our own political structures as well, that colonialism, by the fossil fuel industry is still alive and well. You can see the increased levels of lobbying, especially with Breed Smith's climate emergency bill, that there was a huge increase in lobbying by the oil and gas industry prior to that. You've got then examples of people like Conor Lenihan, who wants to leave office, going directly to work for the fossil fuel and gas industries. You've got Shell, in Nigeria, and the control that they have there, that they could essentially order the deaths of people like Ken Saro-Wiwa. So there's a direct link now between the fossil fuel and extractive industries with governments, and it's very much, for me anyway, a new colonialism. It mightn't just be straightforward nation states, but the colonialism is very much alive and well. In relation to class and gender, I think for us, where we are, it's very much a rural area, a lot of factories, mix of people, farmers, people commuting. Gender-wise, in Love Leitrim, I can only speak for Love Leitrim, and I'm conscious I'm a man as well, speaking on behalf of Love Leitrim, but within Love Leitrim, it was very much women that were driving a lot of the actions and direction in Love Leitrim. And although they mightn't have had the platforms and maybe got the press releases or whatever, it was very much, and I know my own, she won't like me saying, but Dervla, my wife, Dervla Keegan, did a huge amount as PRO. So, and there was a lot of other women in Love Leitrim who did a huge amount and really did drive the campaign in our organisation. I think that's probably commonplace across most groups. But unfortunately, I'm conscious I'm a man who's saying that, but that's very much a fact in Love Leitrim. In relation to class, I suppose for us it's become more important in relation to the importation of gas from places like Pennsylvania and those communities, because what the companies try and do is they go to poor communities. They came to North Leitrim because they thought there's nothing here, and they thought they were going to get an easy ride and just get in, and sure, there's no jobs here, and should people be crying out for work? That wasn't the case. We fought against that and showed them people here the alternatives. We're conscious as well in relation to Pennsylvania and other American communities and places that Chaz has mentioned as well, Indigenous peoples, that the companies are trying to do the same thing here. So we have to directly and indirectly oppose the exploitation of maybe lower socioeconomic groups, marginalised people, Indigenous peoples, directly in that we don't want it happening here, but also indirectly in that we don't facilitate exploitation by allowing the construction of plants like Shannon LNG or Cork Harbour. So class and genders is very, very much still top of the agenda for us.
Great, thanks a million. And yeah, I would have been involved in the Rossport protests down in Mayo, and so much of what you said there chimes as well. I think it opened up my eyes a lot to class issues, with selecting the area and stuff like that. I read an amazing book by Mary Manning on the Dunn Stores protest, and I thought it was very interesting how the class aspect came out very strongly in that we'll say the trade unions pushed initially for the protests against South Africa, but then when the working class took action and did the strike, they pulled back to support the trade unions, and the powers that be pulled back support. So in the end, they were isolated a lot, and I saw that a lot in Mayo and in other protests as well. So sorry, I just wanted to add that in. So we have maybe another just a couple of quick minutes before we go to the audience questions. So maybe I'd ask maybe Cormac the last question, just to be maybe brief as possible. Maybe just how do we get to a society where minerals and fossil fuels aren't viewed as resources to be exploited, And is there any such thing as sustainable extraction? You're muted again there, Cormac.
Yeah, sorry about that. First of all, to begin, and I'll be as quick as I can, but there's no such thing for us. There's no such thing as sustainable extraction. We need real change. Sustainable extraction of these minerals is an oxymoron. We need to begin to think differently. And it's interesting that 3 women leaders of New Zealand, Iceland, and Scotland are putting forward, and something that we think is very important and necessary, is a new way, a new methodology for judging the success of any nation or country, to replace the narrow and short-term and inadequate GDP or GNP current rules. We believe that at the heart of all government policies, the health and well-being needs to become the overriding policy concern. And this would mean changing the traditional obsession with growth and GDP with health and well-being. So that's, until that happens, and indeed until the rights of nature and rights of communities are given recognition in laws, we believe that there will be no real change, and that these toxic industries that don't value either people or nature or resources, but are only focused solely on greed, on profits, on money. It's only then that there will be change. And I think that arising from COVID, the climate change and environmental crisis, and the environmental destruction that's happening, and the awareness, the growing awareness internationally, that this must change. There's a new almost context out there that is much more favourable, and the idea of developing a circular economy that resources are reused and reused and recycled and reduced. That we have the beginnings, we have the bones. So we're very hopeful that from these signs and the energy that's about among the grassroots people, that there can be real change, but it'll not come easy. We know that people in power, like even Boris Johnson, are beginning to realise, in his own words, that money can't buy health. So there's the context, but it's the ordinary people, the people with ideas, with enthusiasm and commitment to change, that'll bring this about. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a million. Thanks for that. Maybe Jamie, could I go to you next? So what would sustainable extraction look like for you? And I can probably guess that there's no way to sustainably frack, but how do we get to a society where we don't see these resources that we need to exploit them, really?
Yeah, I suppose it's a bit like what Cormac said, that when I saw the question initially, I was kind of struggling to get around it. I don't think there is such a thing as sustainable extraction, and if anyone can convince me, then I'm all open to it. But at the minute, I don't really think it exists. In relation to, I suppose, getting beyond the point where we see things as resources to be exploited, I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. I think we have to keep spreading the message, spreading the science, getting the IPCC. We keep quoting that report that we've only got 7 years to take action. Even that's getting less and less all the time. Those years are ticking by. We have to keep getting across the urgency. Working with the young people, especially, who have been fantastic with the climate strikes and the Climate Youth Assembly, who brought through things like the actual ban on Shannon or importing fracked gas was an actual action in that. Spread the message in your workplaces, at schools, at all different levels in your community. I think it's important as well that when elections do come up, we have you know, we all have issues maybe with elections and who gets elected, but we have to make that conscious choice to elect people that we trust and that we know are actually serious about tackling the issue. That's an important thing, I think. Wherever I suppose the extractive or fossil fuel industries raise their heads, we have to get organized and resist on a community level, on a local level, on a national level. Also, just, I suppose, it's just trying to, I mean, just, I think we're winning. Someone did make a point at the start, I don't remember who said it was, who it was, but politicians have moved on. It's slow, it's very slow, and it's not quick enough, but we are making small gains. You know, the fact that we convinced, as the anti-fracking movement, Fine Gael to bring in an anti-fracking bill was a huge step forward. And I think it's testament to the fact the work of the wider climate campaigns. So I think if we can keep maintaining that level of pressure, you know, the LNG for us is going to be a big thing as well. I know there was a lot of concern about the programme for government, and it's, you know, it's by no means perfect, far from it. But we've got one concrete action in there. We have to hold people to account from our perspective, you know, is making sure that ban on LNG imports becomes real and not just words in a document. So that's something we're working on with Safety Before LNG in Kerry and with Pennsylvania communities and in New York. So that's something practical we need to do as well. But I think it's just to keep spreading the message in every level that you can, is to get it out there, whether it's about fossil fuels, climate change, the biodiversity crisis. Just get involved on any kind of level you can. And I think if we can do that, we just need to keep maintaining pressure on politicians and decision makers and interest groups. But I think we're winning, but it's not happening fast enough. That's the only worry. But we are winning, and I think that, you know, the success of our campaign, the LNG. You know, Charles has mentioned some issues that some of the campaigns we had with Dakota as well, and we actually linked up with Dakota over the pipeline, and we did a solidarity action, which got a huge amount of coverage. Was from Eagles Rock to Standing Rock. We have a Eagles Rock here in Leitrim, and we had a photograph in solidarity with Standing Rock, and it went all around the world. So things like that, you can make the change, but just hold firm. Get organized wherever you see it in your communities, and don't put the head down, because we don't have any more time to waste.
Cool. Thanks a million, Jamie. That was great. And I suppose I just like to say that I think that Love Leitrim have been pivotal in getting that in the programme for government, the policy change that was in the programme for government on LNG import facility. So I think that should be acknowledged probably as well. So maybe, Chaz, could I ask you the same question? How do we get to a society that minerals aren't just seen as resource to be extracted? Your thoughts on that, please.
There, can you hear me now? Yeah. So how do we go back to what was once, right? I mean, we once had lived in a place where it was sustainable, and you know, I mean, back in the day, I guess we would once we would be moving our whole cities. So we can't do that now, but I do think that there are ways, creative, amazing ways that we can get out in front of this still. And I feel I'm so glad I did this today, because I feel hopeful. Listening to you guys again has given me hope. I think, you know, we're in the middle of Trump's America here in South Dakota, and it's a bleak, angry, bitter place, you know, where we it's not a place of community. It's not a place sustainable at all. But there are ways for things to be sustainable, and I think we have the knowledge, and the science is there. You know, finally the science agrees with the indigenous philosophy, and everywhere. The scientists are on our side. So, you know, that understanding that we're all related, that we share the energy from each other, you know, we can have enough for everyone. The earth provides enough for everyone's needs. Just not everyone's greed, right? I think that that's an understanding that a lot more people are getting. And I think that, you know, it's a hopeful thing that that you folks are having this webinar, that we are all connected on a level, and that level of activism, that from Standing Rock to Eagle Rock, picture went all the way around the world. Those kinds of stands that we take together as human beings are gonna make the difference, and it is making the difference. And so I'm honored always to be asked to speak, and especially from anyone from Ireland. It's the only media I'm doing nowadays is Irish media. So I appreciate you folks so much, and the sentiments and the passion that comes from you all is stuff that's so familiar to me, because it's the stuff that we have. You know, we have dug our roots in, or dug our heels in, and we're not leaving from these lands, and we're not going to be annihilated by these systems that have been created to annihilate us. And we all, as human beings, have that responsibility to spread the good message, to do what we can to get out on the streets if we can, to make to grow our own foods, to have food sovereignty. I have not been doing any activism, but I have been raising chickens. I have 37 of them now, and so you know, I can eat a meal raised here on our place. And so you know, that is the future that we need to move toward. And you know, the science is there, the possibilities are endless. The ways that we have innovated throughout time has been amazing. And so, you know, I have no doubt in my mind that we can fix what we have broken, and create something new and better, and something that is inclusive of everyone, and everyone and every being, all the species. We are caretakers, and we're it's so gratifying to me to know that so many people around the world are caretakers as well. So Wopila Tanka in my people's language. Just a big thank you for all of the work that you guys are all doing, and for all the past work that you've done, and all the future work you shall do. I think it is heard around the world, just like that message, the work, the effort that we all put in. Every part of the universe feels that and knows it. So I guess that's all I have to say about that. Is that okay?
Cool. That's perfect. Thanks a million, Chaz. I'll pass over to Jacinta now to ask a few of the audience questions, maybe.
Great, thanks, Owen. And just also to mention, just for this webinar, we had expected that we'd also have a speaker from the Giddington clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, who are opposing the coastal gassing pipeline. And so that's a 670-kilometre pipeline that's planned to transport frack gas from northeast British Columbia to the coast. So we had hoped that they weren't able to join us this evening, but hopefully we can reconnect with them in the future. And that's why we have to thank Jamie and the folks at Love Leitrim for stepping in at such short notice. Not that you would know that it was short notice. It was great. So we just have a few questions from the audience coming up from YouTube. So there's one specifically for Jamie. So it was Jamie mentioned having people from many different backgrounds involved in Love Leitrim. And just wondering if we could hear more about how they dealt with internal conflict or conflicting strategies or theories of change in the group. So that's just one for Jamie. I'll just say all the questions and then we can see who wants to jump in because we're just a little bit short on time. There's another general question which can apply to everybody, and that's around how do you balance the input of the ideological activists with residents who may just want to stop a particular project. And then the final question is directed to Chaz and just the challenges of being an organizer coming from an Indigenous community and how can we eradicate racism in our movements. So maybe we'll just go to Jamie first for that one, specifically targeted at him, and then if people want to come in on the general question, and then maybe we could finish with Chaz on that one and focusing on racism in our movement.
Okay, I suppose I alluded to it earlier that people have different perspectives and different strategies and different ways of doing things, and that was very much the same in Love Leitrim as in any organisation. People just had different maybe ideas about the way forward. But what we did on a regular basis over the, I suppose, since we were founded, was we used to bring in trained facilitators every maybe once or twice a year. They'd volunteered, they were members of ours, and we would always go through, I suppose, a facilitated evening of where we wanted the group to go and strategies and objectives and what was our priorities for the next 6 months, for the next year. That was all thrashed out in a very civilized, democratic way. We always managed to come to the conclusion that we all agreed on, and so that was the way we did that within our own group. There was never any, I suppose, despite the fact that we had people from all different political parties and none, we were all united around the fact that we knew we didn't want this industry coming in. So, but to avoid any conflict, we did have those facilitated workshops with facilitators. So that was how we dealt with, I suppose, potential conflict internally. Externally then as well, again, Love Leitrim wasn't the only anti-fracking group. There was anti-frack groups all over the country. Again, different points of view on strategy and tactics. And that's good. I mean, there's different strategies for different times. What we also did in relation to trying to bring groups together was we initially initiated the forming of what became known as the Fracking Free Network, which was a network of groups from both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And we would have met again maybe 3 times a year in rotating locations. We would have had agreed strategies again, aims and objectives with facilitators. That's probably more complicated system because you different groups rather than just members within your own group. But again, that worked well. And of course, you're always going to have disagreements and conflict. But I think once you put the system in place that allows people to express their points of view and to have I suppose, an impartial way of developing an action plan for the year, whether it's for your own group in Love Leitrim or for a wider network as in Fracking Free Network, that's how we got over it. And in general, most people, we all worked extremely well together. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jamie. And then the general one, maybe, I don't know if Cormac or Chaz wanted to come in on that, just how you balance the input of, people say ideological activists, so I guess that means people from maybe outside the community that want to be involved in the campaign with residents who may just want to stop their project. So again, maybe different ideologies.
Hello?
Yeah, hi Cormac, we can hear you.
Okay, just a very quick response on the ideological activists versus residents. I would add in there the concern that groups like ours would have and campaigns like ours for agent provocateurs coming in to stir things on start your video, sorry if you couldn't hear me there, my apologies. I would on the issue of ideological activists versus residents, I would add in the issue and the awareness among groups like ours of agent provocateurs being sent in or coming in to join and to stir up trouble in groups. We'd be very conscious of that, and generally how we in the groups operate is to keep the focus on our main point. What are we about in this campaign? We're about saving the water, the air, the land, and people's health and well-being from the toxic pollution of gold mining. And we try and keep the focus around that. Like any group of individuals and people coming together with various degrees of experience of community organizing, there are tensions. So far we have managed those, sometimes with help from other people, but we're very conscious, but keeping the focus on what we're about and what the campaign is about, and then and who is our enemy, as well as allowing individual groups the capacity to do their own actions if they wish. Each of the individual groups, and we have 12 different groups in the overall campaign, they are all independent, but then we try and come together, and we do come together for various actions. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks, Cormac. And I'll just go to Chaz now, if you had any comments on those other questions, or if you just want to focus on the one around how eradicating racism from our movement. So.
Well, that's such a huge question. If I knew the correct answer to that, everyone would know my name, right? But I think that everyone has to be involved, and that's the thing about the difference between how it is now. How it is now, some one or two people, the oligarchs or whoever's in charge, make the decision, and that's how we do it. So when we include everyone, it's messy, and there's lots of differing opinions and understandings, and I think that's the thing about white supremacy, is that we're living under this conditioning that we're unaware of most often in America here. People aren't aware that the only idea that they have about an Indian person is someone wearing feathers running around on a horse. Now, I'm a really good horse person, but I don't ever usually wear my feathers when I do that. But so there's all these, there's only 3 million Indigenous people left in America, right? After we started the first contact, there's a lot of different numbers, but some people say as high as 352 million. So down to 3 million of us. There's no public education. There's no public education about the history of slavery in America and all of these things. We live over here in this place where we are really conditioned, and they changed the history books in the state of Texas last week to say that those that slaves were imported workers. So this is actively something that they're doing. They're changing the way that we talk about these things and denying the history which is in our face, right? So destroying white supremacy is something that we have to do, but it's also a part of colonialism. It's a part of capitalism. It's a part of the structures that we're fighting against. But so we have them internalized as well. One of the things that we can do as human beings is to heal from our own oppression, is to put our healing first. And when you become a healed person, someone who can walk around in balance, then you don't feel the need to oppress other people, and you don't feel the need to put your viewpoint on other people. You don't have to kill all the buffalo in order to create your homestead. So there's these things that we have done in the name of greed, in the name of colonization, in the name of civilization, that are really atrocious. And the only way that we can change that is by opening it up and understanding what those things that we did are. Have a real truth and reconciliation time here in America. And I think that's what we want as Indigenous people. We want to be heard. We want to be recognized, and we want justice. We want justice. Everyone deserves justice, and not just the words the actions. We've had a lot of words from folks for the last 500 years, right? A lot of words, but the actions that we get are, actions that dehumanize us, actions that destroy our culture, actions that destroy our land, actions that destroy our health, actions that destroy our religion. So those are the actions that we live by, but the words are always different. So what we want, and I think that what we want as Indigenous people is the same thing that all human beings want, is that we want recognition. We want universal health care. We want universal, education, all these other things that we can provide, but they choose not to. We can provide, we have the resources. If we had, as the Lakota people in America, if we had the money that they stole from the gold mines, from the Black Hills, we would be one of the richest countries in the world. We wouldn't have to be the poorest people in the nation. So we want reparations too. We want some justice in that sense. So I think that's how we get rid of racism, of white supremacy. We do reparations. We pay the true cost of things. We still don't pay the true cost of gas in this country. We subsidize those killing industries, and so we need to pay the true cost, the human cost, the earth cost, all these costs. We pay those true costs, and do the true work of being of human beings connected on a global scale. Then maybe we can do those things that like end racism, right, and have justice in this world, right?
Thanks so much, Naz. Yeah, and like you say, there needs to be action. There needs to be action, not just the empty words and the rhetoric. There needs to be real action, such as reparations. We're just running a little bit over time, so hopefully people can just stay with us, for a few more minutes, because we have some great music coming up now, and I think art and music is a crucial key part of any campaign. We're very lucky to have Connor, who's also known as Techno Peasant, and he has written some songs inspired by the Sperrins campaign, and he's described as a banjo shredding, blues punk, mountain man preacher for the post-apocalyptic generation. So Connor will have a few songs, and I think they're both focused on the Sperrins. So I think it's a great way to round up the evening.
Okay, folks, thank you so much for asking me to this tonight. It's been fantastic to hear you all speaking, and this is my wee contribution to the campaign as a song to try and get the message out to people who mightn't hear it otherwise. Because it was Tyrone, it had to be a country song. So this is the heart of the Sperrin Mountains. Now, one evening as the sun went down, this man came up our lane. He said he was me neighbour, but from Canada he came. And he asked me if I'd like to sup from the Radiant's money fountain. 'Cause up in the hills they're sticking in the drills. They swear that there's a fortune lying under Gortin in the heart of the Sperrin Mountains. Rum-diddle-da, rum-a-diddle-da, rum-a-diddle-da, da-diddle-diddle-light. Oh, they say the gold is needed for the fingers of the world. If we did not have this gold, the boy could go at his girl. But here's the only streams in Ulster, muscles yield up pearls. And the oak and the ash and the rowan tree shelter bluebells and blaeberries, and the salmon and the otter study one another in the heart of the Sperrin Mountains. Rum-a-dee-da, 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 rum-a-dee-da-do. There isn't golden nuggets and it isn't golden dust. It's not so my prospector we is dungarees roll up. If 20,000 tons of rock, they cracked it off in trucks. But there's nothing in packs like a boost in the tax and a win of jobs for the working slobs. Drop a tell away, you really want to pray for the heart of the Spare Mountain. On the old Hill River flows on the mead to school. They combine to make the morn that lively sparkling jewel. And sure up flows on the mead to fen, and thus becomes the foil. Now it takes some pop to screw that up, but if anybody can, when it's already on, the DOEs is as grand to me in the heart of the Spare Mountain. Well, I tell that stranger where to go and why I can't agree with slurry cats of cyanide and a torn community. For the living land and the dreaming streams are treasures we can't forsake. And as he limped away, I swear I heard him say, someday you'll shriek, 'cause you never got your fake, and my gold boom cake, well, this made me shake, till I raised my stake, oh, holly clap, of a brave wing left, and I made my stake, so no matter what you take, you're never gonna break the heart of the Spare Mountain. Thank you. Second wee song I'm going to do. Hold this up for Chaz, they see. I was fortunate a year after I met Chaz to meet a warrior, a First Nations warrior who came over here to teach us how to make drums. And John Samosi from up near Saskatchewan, and he helped me, showed me how to make this drum. And it's important to sing the positive songs and the songs about the heart of where we're from, and to sing together. I can't hear any of you tonight, even if you want to sing, because Zoom doesn't let us do that. But sing it out in your heart if you want. It's in Irish, but it's very, very simple. Leg door na sperin ye, fannacht sna sperin ye. Let the gold of the sperrins remain in the sperrins. So, leg door na sperin ye, fannacht sna sperin ye. Slave je glan agus glass, howls green and clean. Dina ledger ein teha, a people strong and united. Is he Creena Fela, for she is the heart of gold. And I'll just sing it a couple of wee times, and sing it out in your heart, because that's what it's all about. You know, it's you got to defeat your enemy. You don't have to sing that song. You can sing your own song, and you want to be singing from your heart if you want to be loving where you want to love. Lig door na sperin ye, fannacht na sperin ye. Lig door na sperin ye, fannacht na sperin ye. Lig door na sperin ye, fannacht na sperin ye. Slave chiglan agus glass. Dina ledger entiha, Esi crina felei Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Slet je glan agus glas Dina lejar tiha Oh, isi crina felei Sing yourselves Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Ligdor na sperni Van lax na sperni Slevje glan agus glas Adina lejar tiha Esi crina felei
So amazing. Wow. Beautiful drum, too. Wow. That's great, Connor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connor. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Connor.
Very much.
Thank you,
Tá
Connor.
fáilte roh.
That was lovely. It was very nice.
So beautiful.
Oh, he's muted.
Cool. So I suppose I'd just like to thank all the speakers and singer, Connor, for their input tonight. I suppose one last question I'd have is maybe for Cormac. Is there anything that's needed in the campaign, or what would you like people from outside the area to support the campaign? Is there stuff you'd like to see?
Thank you, and thanks, Connor. What we'd like is that people stay abreast of the campaign through follow on Save Our Sperms Facebook page, and the Greencastle People's Office on the other Facebook pages. If you haven't sent a letter of objection in against the Dalridian planning application, you can still do so. It's still available. Anyone, anywhere of any age, anywhere in the world can send a letter of objection in. The details are on the Save Our Sperms Facebook page, or if you send an email, a message to us, we can make sure you can get it. So that's the main thing. And your solidarity, your friendship, your support in the campaign is really very important. And the inspiration from singers like Connor keep the campaign, keep the spirits up even through more difficult times. And all the campaigns through, you know, thanks again, Charles, for your inspiration, and thanks to the others. Lovely trim there. It's good to see Jimmy, and we're very familiar with the campaign on that campaign. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Cormac. And I suppose, like Jamie mentioned as well, in terms of the LNG terminals, that there's a commitment in the programme for government, but the pressure needs to be kept up to make sure that that promise comes to fruition. So I think, yeah, needing to keep the pressure up on all of those, on all fronts. So yeah, thanks a million, everyone, and thanks for the whole Slí Eile team for all the background work that they're doing as well for all these webinars. And so just to let you know about next week's webinar, which again will be same time and same place. So next week, the webinar will focus on ecofascism and racism in environmental movements. And our speakers include MERGE, so that's Migrant and Ethnic Minorities for Reproductive Justice, the Brazilian Left Front, and Feminist Fight Back. And we'll have another speaker as well that will announce as well during the week. So that will focus on the history of white supremacy, colonialism, and fascism within mainstream environmental, ecological, and conservation movements, and looking at some of the kind of colonial assumptions that some of these movements were based on, yeah, and it's, I suppose, looking at what those assumptions do then towards Indigenous communities, immigrants, ethnic minorities. So, and I suppose looking at current day, you know, there isn't maybe the openly racist rhetoric in mainstream environmental movements, but there's still racist and classist assumptions, creating spaces that are often hostile to Indigenous people from ethnic minority backgrounds and poor people. So the talk aims to kind of explore this history and how it's influenced the current environmental movements, but then also how Indigenous people, ethnic minorities, and working class people have created movements and are part of the resistance, kind of challenging this racism within movements. So that will be next week. So hopefully you can join us. You can join us for that. So we can finish up now. So thanks everybody for sticking around for a little bit longer. So yeah, we can finish there. So thanks everyone.
Much. Thanks, Laura.
Hi, Chaz, as well. It's great to get a chance to finally meet